Today, in Draw My Life, the true origin of the Grinch. This story goes back a long time ago in one of the coldest regions of Finland. Isolated from any civilization, in a rural village lived a young boy who did not have an easy childhood. At school, he was bullied. Their peers laughed at his size and how hairy he was compared to other children. He was often called a monster. At home, he had no one to keep him company either. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother had abandoned them when he was only 2 years old. He had no siblings or close family. He always felt alone until he met his only friend, his dog Max, whom he had rescued from the street. One day, the young man was on his way home and heard the cries of a dog. He was shivering with cold and his ribs were sticking out because he was so skinny. Everyone walked by him without paying any attention. So the young man decided to take him home and take care of him. From that moment on, they became inseparable. On the young man's 15th birthday, he was getting ready for school when his father woke from the couch, crankier than usual. His breath stank of alcohol. He started yelling at his son as he grabbed him tightly by the arm. Max then woke up and started barking at the father, so he immediately kicked the dog and slammed it against the wall. The young man lost it and started hitting his father. But since the father was big and strong, his punches didn't do anything to him. The father raised his arm, closed his fist, and punched his son in the face, leaving him stunned. When he arrived at school, his classmates made fun of him because of the wound on his cheek. They began to say that he had gotten it while trying to shave his beard. The young man escaped from school, ashamed and sad, and ran home. He walked in quietly, and his father was snoring on the living room couch. He called Max, grabbed what little food was left in the house, and ran away without looking back. They both ran from the home and the town that never accepted them. The young man knew that they had to seek shelter before nightfall. Otherwise, the cold would probably kill them. They headed for the highest mountain. They spent hours struggling with the cold and thirst, but they had each other. At the top, they found a cave that could protect them and live peacefully. But problems didn't take long to arise. The biggest of all, hunger. They had eaten everything they took from home and had to look for something to eat. They spent weeks eating insects and whatever they could find in the cave. The young man's teeth got dirty and hair grew all over his body. Desperate for food, the young man decided to go down the village to steal something to eat. He waited until it got dark, and once in town, he went to the house of one of his classmates who bullied him. He sneaked in and took everything he needed without anyone noticing. He was so successful in this first mission that from then on, he kept the same routine, going down and stealing food for himself and Max. After a few years, rumors about the thief began to spread in the village. Some locals, sick and tired of being robbed, prepared to catch the thief. So one night, during his usual ransacking, the young man, now a man, was taken by surprise when the villagers had ambushed him. Armed with pitchforks and torches, they waited for the man to come down the mountain. Near the village, Max smelled something was off and barked. The villagers heard him and ran towards them. They both tried to run away, but Max stumbled, and one of the villagers grabbed him by the neck. The man turned and saw that they had taken his best friend. He immediately screamed and ran with all of his strength to help him. He began to push his way through the locals who were trying to catch him, and the man's rage was such that it took many people to stop him. The mayor, who had Max by the neck, seeing what was coming to him, quickly grabbed his pitchfork and ran it through the dog's throat. The man stopped and froze. He released a scream that echoed throughout the whole town. He had gone mad. He pushed his way through the crowd and fled to the mountain. Several months went by, and nobody heard from him again in the village. The man had more hair on his body, and his eyes had turned yellow. Not a minute of the day went by that he didn't think with anger and resentment towards the villagers, planning his revenge. Until one day, he came up with an idea. He would paint himself green so that no one would recognize him, and he could go back to stealing at night. The plan worked. He stole everything he wanted without anyone saying anything to him, since everyone was afraid of him. However, after a while, the same thing happened. The locals lost their fear and decided to do something about it. Because of his monstrous appearance, they nicknamed him the Grinch. Nobody ever wanted to follow him to see him again, only the adorable little Cindy Lou, who one day decided to make an unexpected visit. When the little girl showed up, the Grinch yelled at her to get out, and even though the little girl left, she came back day after day. Cindy knew that deep down, the Grinch was not a bad person. Instead, the Grinch's first thought was to kill her and avenge Max's death. However, he saw something in Cindy Lou that reminded him of himself when he was little. One day, the little girl tried to convince him that Christmas was a time of happiness and sharing, so she invited him to spend Christmas in town. The Grinch got upset and yelled at her to get out of his house. There was nothing to celebrate. The little girl did not give in to the yelling and asked him why he hated Christmas so much. He then told her how difficult his childhood had been and that day he had to run away from home was the same day as his birthday, December 24th. A few days went by until Christmas finally arrived. Cindy Lou came up for a visit, but the Grinch was more upset than usual. The little girl had brought him a birthday present. He took the gift and looked at it in surprise. No one had ever remembered his birthday, and even less giving him a present. Moved by Cindy's gesture, the Grinch decided to indulge her and go down. The little girl burst with joy and they went down to the mountain together. All the locals were celebrating in the town plaza. When the Grinch showed up with Cindy Lou, the people panicked. They grabbed the first thing they could find to defend themselves. The town mayor warned that Cindy was in danger and that they had to do something before the monster hurt her. When the Grinch heard the word monster, his childhood memories came flooding back. He began to remember all his bad experiences and was filled with hatred and resentment. His pupils dilated and his expression changed completely. He smiled from ear to ear and ran to the mayor of the town. Some villagers rushed at him with pitchforks to murder him. The Grinch, consumed with anger, strangled a villager and took his pitchfork from him. Then he began to slaughter anyone who came in front of him and made his way towards the mayor. Once he had him in front of him, the Grinch took the pitchfork, drove it with all his might into his stomach, and lifted him off the ground. Immediately after, the Grinch heard Cindy Lou screaming. The Grinch, covered in blood and possessed by rage, noticed the trail of corpses he had left behind. For a moment, he felt guilt, but when he saw Cindy Lou, anger took control of him. You made me do this," he said to her. Immediately, he pulled the pitchfork out of the mayor's stomach, threw it at the little girl like a spear, and thrust it into her chest. The Grinch ran off the mountain and left Cindy Lou bleeding to death. That was the last time anyone saw the Grinch. The next day, the few that survived from the village went up to the mountain, but they found no trace of the monster. Everything was lying on the ground and smashed to pieces. Since then, the furry monster's name has never been mentioned, and I won't be the one to do it. What did you think of the story? A little gory for these days? Nah. Christmas is just around the corner, and as we know, you love creepy stuff. We wanted to leave you this little present. But get ready because there are many more to come. We hope you have a Merry Christmas and see you in the next one.